As our culture shifts from live shows to live streams, the Chicago Cultural Alliance finds it more important than ever to dive back into our roots, to create a platform that welcomes tough conversations, and to share our cultural stories of resilience. Welcome to Cultural Connections. Well, welcome to Cultural Connections. This is a visual podcast, and we've designed this podcast to raise awareness of the voices of the Chicago Cultural Alliance and the organizations it represents and its supporters. Each episode, we will hear from different cultural backgrounds, different community members within the Alliance, and we'll talk about topics related to cultural diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I am very excited to welcome our guest, Janet Carl-Smith, who is the former Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. Thank you, Janet, for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
We asked you as a part of this. You are quite the professional in the cultural sector, known and supporter as an advocate for the cultural arts. And we've just met, but you have a long history with the Chicago Cultural Alliance. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you got involved with the Alliance and what excites you about it.
Well, first of all, my role at the Department of Cultural Affairs, it was before it was the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events.
Yes, which is what it is
now.
So
it's a little shorter to say. My role consisted of two parts. One was to oversee all of the programming and exhibitions that we did, but also to work actively with arts organizations in the community and to help to bring them together to do collaborative programming, but also to do arts management, skill development, and things like that. And so we actually, at the department many years ago, had a coalition of community cultural centers that Juana Guzman really started. Yeah. And so, and that, it was fine to have it come from the city, but actually, I think what started to happen was the interest through the Field Museum of developing the relationships between those cultural centers in terms of what they were doing. So I was involved as one of, I guess, probably the primary representative of the department at that point in some of the feasibility studies and the discussions about it. In addition, I've had a long interest, and a big part of my role was in the service organizations. I kind of look at the service organizations like the Cultural Alliance, like the League of Chicago Theaters, the Chicago Artists Coalition, a number of them, as sort of the cultural infrastructure of the city, because it is a good way to bring groups together, to be able to have them collaborate, but also to be able to share information with them and learn what the concerns of those constituent groups were and what role the city could play.
Yeah, you've been a strong promoter of art service organizations over the years and how they can bring these cultural centers together throughout the city, from not just the Alliance represents museums and cultural centers, but there's theaters and other arts organizations that, working collaboratively, is a huge asset to especially organizations that might be smaller or have smaller staff, and creating these networks are really important to how they can help each other operate and exist. How important that is today, I would love to hear from your perspective, as we are dealing with so many challenges in the nonprofit sector as a whole, between theaters and museums closing. How do you think art service organizations can help in the sustaining of these organizations for the future?
Well, I think what they traditionally do, which is to promote
Hmm.
and advocate for the needs of their members, and also I think it's a lonely time for
Hmm.
organizations, and uh, one of the things that I've learned over the years is the smaller organizations are very anxious to talk to each other until that, but there, you have to remember that there is a level where they're each looking for audiences, they're each looking
Hmm.
for resources from funders
Hmm.
and visibility. And
Hmm.
so I think to have a service organization that can say, let's work together in terms of telling the
Hmm.
story
Yeah.
is really helpful. Also, frankly, just providing a forum where people can talk about
Right.
those things.
Yeah, it is interesting because you mention kind of, I've worked in museums for a long time, and worked with nonprofits for a long time, and I used to live in New York, which I think you're also from New York,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
from
I'm
New York.
originally from
Yeah.
New York, grew up in the Bronx.
Oh,
Um,
Brooklyn Heights.
Brooklyn, excellent.
Yeah.
And in New York, working in the museums and in the art sector, I did work at the Guggenheim and at the
Hmm.
Met, and there's a lot of competitiveness
That's right.
amongst our art organizations, especially at that level, the larger ones. But also, there's something unique about Chicago, I think,
Hmm.
that doesn't have that sense of competitiveness. It's definitely much more of a collaborative arts environment. And I think art service organizations that are in Chicago
Hmm.
help to create that sense of community and collaboration. Don't you? Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it goes way back. And I've been reading recently, I pick it up and put it down periodically, Mark Larson's book called Ensemble, about the development of the theater
Hmm.
community in Chicago.
Hmm.
And you can see where artists who are wanting to develop, they need a place to do their work,
Hmm.
and they need an audience to come and see it. And so they move towards creating organizations, and they realize that they can't do it by themselves. They have to
Hmm.
get some help. And so they look to each other,
Hmm.
and and I don't know, because I haven't worked in the arts in any other
City, yeah,
city, that I don't know what is different
yeah.
particularly, but I do know that in all of my years working
Hmm.
for the city, that there was this goal that we had
Hmm.
of, let's bring people together so they can collaborate, because they
Yeah,
can get more out
yeah,
of
yeah.
what they're doing.
So yeah, so the roots of this sense of collaboration truly has been coming from the city too,
Hmm.
from the Department of Cultural Affairs, creating this sense of community between your leadership there and many others that we know
Hmm.
who have been in that position, have been community gatherers, have
Right,
been people who
right.
bring together community, and you say you didn't have experience in other cities, but seeing that from others
Yeah,
in New York, I don't think I got that sense
yeah.
in New York from the city, from the government level. And you have a lot of experience working in at the government level
Hmm.
and in the arts sector. And I'm curious how you help to play that role of a
Mm.
connector between government
Yeah.
and arts. Two very different worlds.
Yeah, recently Michelle Boone and I were talking
Hmm.
about this conference that she was a presenter
Hmm.
in, called Creative Bureaucracy, was the
Hmm.
name of this international conference. And I said, that's all that I was about.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you there's the concept of being an entrepreneur,
Right.
one that works
Internally.
internally to create something new and figure out how to make
Hmm.
it happen. And I think that that is it was difficult lots of times for some of the staff that I worked with because they were artists,
Mm.
and to have one
At the
foot.
city, in the city
No, they were artists in their own right,
community.
and they were
Got it.
working doing
Pro
programming
for the city.
or
Yeah, with the city. Hmm.
exhibitions. And it was a constant sort of, they almost got to a point where they had to decide which was the most important, but it was such a benefit to have
Hmm.
them.
Yeah.
And I think another thing is that my entire time at the city was at the Chicago Cultural Center.
Hmm.
And so when you can be an administrator who is looking at how to provide resources
Hmm.
to the broader community, but you're in a place that has art every day,
Hmm.
and you see the relationship between audiences who come and the art that they're able
Hmm.
to participate
Yeah.
in, is really, I think, something that makes Chicago's Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events pretty unique.
It's unique.
Yeah.
We hear about, I know of New York's Department of Cultural Affairs, and I don't see the same work coming from it, from the city.
However, if you dig a little deeper, you'll see the size of their budget and all of the money that goes out. And that actually is, I think, a point that's sort of relevant
Hmm.
to organizations like the Chicago Cultural
Hmm.
Alliance, because there's the question about how much you become a pass-through
Mm.
for, okay,
Yes.
getting the money and then giving the money to other
Hmm.
organizations, and how much you become actively involved in
Hmm.
trying to advocate for
Hmm.
them and promote them and
Hmm.
help them develop the skills they
Hmm.
need to do their work.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know,
There is a fine line
there is
there
a
on
fine
how,
line.
and we experience it every day, and how we talk to foundations to support the work of the alliance, but
Right.
also we constantly, our message to these large giving organizations are to say that really the community in
Hmm.
these smaller neighborhood-based organizations are the ones that need the support. We're here to support them, but you should be giving back to them. And that's a complicated
It
conversation to
is.
navigate. It's
It
not
is.
easy. You mentioned advocacy, and
Hmm.
I know that you're a strong advocate for the cultural sector, but you're also very much involved in Arts Alliance Illinois. Are you not you're a
I
long-term board
I
member there?
was a long-term
Okay.
board member
Yeah.
and officer, and I still believe so strongly
Hmm.
in the work they do, of
Yeah.
course. And in fact, it got to the point where I was embarrassed to say how long I'd been on that board, because it just
Do
seemed,
you want to
I
say
didn't want I didn't want to admit it, but
it?
I felt very passionate
Right.
about it.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I think was really interesting is that um, a number of years ago at the Alliance, we sat down and talked about how to more effectively advocate. When you
Yes.
have, if you are a person who is heading a major institution, cultural institution, and you're going and talking to a funder or to
Hmm.
government and saying, this is what we need, people say, okay, you get your salary paid by
Hmm.
that funding.
Hmm.
And so you have a different kind of participation. And so, really, what we talked a lot about was how to encourage people who were not part of the arts world
Mm.
to be the advocates. The way
Mhm.
I then took it on in terms of my own role
Mhm.
as I left my job at
Right.
the city was, I wanted to be in the places where I would be the one who could speak up and
Mhm.
say, have you thought about the
Yeah.
arts and what the needs are?
Yeah.
And I think that that is something that
Mhm.
is so important. And it isn't just the board members. if you're a board member for an individual organization, you know how to be an advocate for that
Mhm.
organization, but you may not know how to be an advocate for all of the organizations that are
Sector.
like that, the sector,
Mhm.
exactly. And so I think that's a really important role.
It is, and what an important message to share today too at this
Mm-hmm.
time of people, remembering and
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the arts organizations that are in their neighborhoods, that are in their
That's right.
communities, and speaking out on their behalf. It is very fascinating to think the way that you described it as, me as someone who's working within an arts
Mm-hmm.
organization, approaching foundations and government and legislators and all of this to bring more money to the arts sector. But I am advocating for my own
Yeah.
work, for my own
Yeah.
organization, and we
And you're
need
not
more people like you.
even more so. You need people who are sitting in rooms that we're not invited to.
That's also very true.
So that
Yes.
if it's somebody who is in healthcare,
Mhm.
that they are committed enough, they understand what the arts,
Mhm.
have to give
Mhm.
enough that they can be the ones to say,
Mhm.
okay, how about if we bring artists into
Mhm.
this kind of setting and
Yeah.
see what can happen?
Often things we would never think about. I'm not an artist, and so I
Hmm.
don't have the creative mind. But when you put an artist in a setting like in a children's hospital or in a to create environments that are welcoming and place art on the walls that create a sense of community, that's exactly why art is
Yeah,
important.
that's right.
Yeah, and I did ask this earlier, and I want to ask you as well. We art can help us have a lot of challenging conversations, and today, a time where we need more courageous conversations than ever.
Hmm.
I'm curious why art helps us to do that. Why art helps us to have courageous conversations. Why is that for you particularly?
Well, first of all, I've been a big believer in free public programming,
Mm.
and it's a
Yes,
very tough thing
it's not easy.
because you have to have the resources
Hmm.
to do it for free. But one of the things that I think is really important and what I miss now
Hmm.
is being in a room with people that I would have no other reason to have contact with and share an arts experience. I think there's
The
something,
experiences.
whether it's a performance or
Hmm.
whether it's seen in exhibition, there just is this sense that there are some. It isn't something that's outside of us, but that's a part of us.
Hmm.
And I think also that the kind of distance that's provided by, there's an artist's expression.
Hmm.
There's a distance, so you
Yeah,
can look at it without feeling too responsible yourself.
yeah, yeah. That's very true.
And I think during this time, and I've thought a lot about it in
Hmm.
terms of what I miss,
Hmm.
certainly, but also I think it was time to take a deep breath.
Hmm. Yeah, ugh, that is.
And, I think that there are so many organizations that were on sort of a treadmill,
Mm.
and they had a season to present, they had the next show to put on, they had the next, and they lost a staff member and they needed to replace that staff
Hmm.
member because they had the, you know, and I think it's not unhealthy
Yeah,
at this point
that's true.
to have a moment to take a deep breath and say,
Hmm.
what are we really about? What's the content of our work?
Hmm.
What's most important? How relevant is our mission
Hmm.
still? Are we thinking about that?
Hmm.
And I think and how when we get the resources to get going again,
Yeah,
um, and assuming that those resources will be there, which
yeah.
I know is the scariest
It's
part
the
right now.
scariest part. It
Will
is.
the audiences be there? Will the
Hmm.
funders be there? Will
Yeah.
the
Yeah, because
artists be there.
yeah, because right now, we are. I do want to talk what you think and hope and aspire for the sector to have in the near future, um, given all of this pause that we're all having
Yeah.
now in a time of change. I'm curious what you're excited to see come from this, because we are worried, right? We are
Yeah.
worried that the foundations may not have the money to give the same way that they have, or that individuals may not be able to support the same way with their memberships and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of fear of what is the next for arts organizations, for nonprofits as a whole. But there has to be a light at the end of the tunnel for all of this. What does that look like to you? What do you hope to see come out of this time of change?
Well, first of all, I would say that I think the biggest fear is, will people still care about it?
That's true.
You
Yeah.
know, if they've been living for a period of time, so far as 6 months,
Mhm.
without some of those
Mm.
experiences, do they miss it enough
Are
to,
they craving it right
yeah,
now?
are they craving it? And I think people are.
I
And
do
I
too.
also think we need new voices. We need, and as a sector, I think, the development of some of the painful conversations that are going on now about equity
Mhm.
and diversity and inclusion, but also about age,
Mm.
and new ways of thinking about forms, and what are the structures that are being set up.
Mhm.
But I think there is a bright future.
Mhm.
And one thing, in terms of so many of the members of your organization, they're nimble.
I use that word too
They're
often,
nimble.
but it's exactly what
Yeah.
it is.
The big organizations, the worry has always been with the mid-sized organizations, because the big ones have the boards with the deep pockets. They would say, "Oh, well, we're still in some trouble," but
Mhm.
they have the ability to cut and
Mhm.
move. But
Yeah.
and the little ones are not used to having a lot. They just make the work and present the work and tell the stories because they have to. It's like,
To
and they make
to
it work.
for a small organization like the organizations that we serve and work with, to suddenly cut their budgets in half this year because they need to operate on tighter budgets. I haven't seen a change in what they're doing, because they are still actively out to the community, working with the community,
Hmm.
presenting programs. And although maybe their physical doors may not be open, some of them are still.
Hmm.
We
Yeah.
are open completely. Though their physical doors are not open, they're still engaging with their community on a regular basis, going to other events in the community, the staff going to other events to make sure that their presence is known. Uh, None of that has stopped.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see, and I'm curious about, some of the larger institutions. I haven't seen much dramatic change. We've seen cutbacks,
Yeah.
but not dramatic change, and that is exciting. That is where the bright future comes. Is many of these smaller organizations, I hope, will have opportunity to shine and grow even more so, because this is what they've been doing all along.
Well, I think one of the questions that they need to ask is, do they want to grow? I
Mm.
mean, there is always that. We push organizations to be starting, these nimble, sort of gatherings of people who really care about something.
Mhm.
And then we load them on with all these other
Mhm.
responsibilities and say, okay, you have to have, and I will say, over my career, I've seen that happen. From, you have to have a marketing person,
Yes.
and then you need to have a finance person, and it keeps on going. And then you need to figure out how to be sustainable after you get to a certain point. I think this is a time for questions where organizations say, what do we want to be? What are we most effective being? How, rather than just simply buying into a lot
Right.
of that
Right. And
drive.
it's really impressive also to see the organizations that are feeling more comfortable to speak up to the funders,
Yeah.
to tell them what they really need right now, as opposed to where you may have experienced and seen this in the past of we talk a lot about some of the large foundations who give project specific money that is for a very specific thing because they're looking to either improve a specific area within their mission, and they hope to accomplish something. It's been shifting slowly, but I feel like now we've hit a point where there's a quick shift of a lot of the giving organizations are listening more and are hearing what is needed right now. And it's been a long time coming, but I'm hopeful for that, for the opportunities that the community will have to share their voice and say, we've been waiting for it for a long time.
Yeah.
And you can help us do that now. And that's going to be an exciting moment.
So often though, people, because I've worked a lot with the foundations
Yes.
and worked for a couple of the foundations. So, but one of the things that I think, is tough is that people who are those arts people and foundations at whatever level, they have boards and they have this foot in the community too. And so it's, they're being asked to demonstrate impact.
Impact, yes.
And so one of the dangers in that is that a foundation will say, well, in order to show the impact of our grant making, we are going to fund this particular area. This is happening now in terms of equity. And I think it's overdue.
Long overdue.
But there are other organizations that are sitting out there saying, wait, you used to like me yesterday, how come?
Yeah.
So it's a tough situation.
There's so much more to it than the relationship with the program officer
Exactly.
and the institution, right? There is each foundation has its own missions, its own goals to achieve that it needs to show to respond to the people who are also giving to their organizations. And it's a complicated process.
Very complicated. Well, everything these days is complicated. So, I mean,
yes, it is.
Why should that be any different?
I want to talk just briefly on your past with the Alliance. We continue to sing your praises and thank you for the work that you did in the past that has helped us now and set us on the paths that we need to for change. And if it weren't for you and your levels at the city level, as deputy commissioner, to promote collaboration, to promote equity, that I don't know if we'd be in the same position we are today, because we see this with so many other cities who don't have that sense, as we talked about in the beginning, and it was because of your hard work at the city level that really starts to create this sense that is so unique to Chicago. So I just want to thank you for that work.
A lot of people involved with that, shall we say.
No, obviously, yes,
but,
not just you, but
yeah.
there's a lot of leaders in the Chicago community that have done that work to make that happen.
And that, I think, is the kind of networking that I think happens on all kinds of levels and in all kinds of places is what helps to move all of this forward.
It truly does. Yes, it is the working together as a community, as you said in the beginning, of small organizations coming together and supporting one another is how we get through all of it. And it is how we'll get through this moment.
Yeah.
We've had many challenges that have faced us in the past in a nonprofit and art sector. This one we could have never expected, but there is a lot of hope for resilience here. Would you say that too?
I would absolutely say that. And I'd say particularly with the kinds of organizations that are members of the Alliance. Because I think, remember, people aren't traveling now, but they are craving some experiences that are going to take them outside of what they're used to. And I think there's a huge opportunity for the alliance organizations to help people in the city learn to understand each other too. So
And understand the world. Right now, we're
Yeah.
not traveling internationally.
No.
We won't be, who knows for how long. And to know that we have 40 cultural heritage centers here, all representative of different cultures
Yeah.
and neighborhoods throughout the city, they are the voice, the international voice
that's right.
of the community. And you can go there and go to Chinatown and experience Chinese culture and Chinese American culture right here in Chicago.
Right.
You can do that with the Swedish Museum in Andersonville. There's so many.
The only thing that I would say as a caution with
Yes.
that is I think, and this is having sort of worked some with the Alliance over the
Yeah.
years, there are so many roles that people outside will want to put on these organizations that are trying their best to reflect, to pay attention to their own mission and reflect their culture and share their culture, which is a huge thing. But to get to be seen as being able to provide all these other opportunities sometimes is I think
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah, no, it's true. They can't be everything
Yeah,
for everyone,
right.
right? But what they are
Yeah.
centers of community, right? No matter if they're, it doesn't matter if they're a museum or a social service center or an art center. They're all centers of community and gathering spaces that are essential. And we look forward to continuing to support them as much as we can. And we're excited for your continued support as an advocate for the cultural sector. So thank you so much, Janet, for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit with me today and talk about this. We'll get to know each other more as the years
Yeah.
go on. I'm
We'll have some
excited.
more conversations about New York and how Chicago is so much better.
Chicago is so much better than New York.
Yeah, it
I can't
is.
say that too loud, but
Yeah.
but it is.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Peter.